Structure of the Constitution. Article 1, the legislative branch. From this point forward, we're going to look at different parts of the Constitution and what they set up. Each lesson will focus on a different article. When you think article, I want you to think like a news article. How like an article is a part of the paper as a whole. Or like I'm in a magazine, an article is just part of the whole magazine. It's kind of the same thing with the articles of the Constitution. Each article is part of the Constitution, and each article focuses on a different subject or a different topic. So for Article 1, we'll look at the legislative branch. So the objective are the things you'll be able to do. You'll examine the structure and powers of the legislative branch. You'll see what they can and cannot do, and you'll evaluate the importance of those powers. And the questions you'll be able to answer by the end of the lesson are: what type of power does the legislative branch have, and how do we ensure power is not corrupted? So remember, like we learned about in some of the previous lessons, the Constitution is really not that long. It's only 7,000 words. Sounds like a lot, but like we said earlier, it's only about 13 or 14 pages. It's not really that long. And it's divided into three parts. The preamble, which is pretty quick, and it's at the beginning. The articles, which we're going to focus on, and then the amendments, which we've looked at a little bit in the past. Those are all the changes. So just to review, the Constitution is divided into the preamble. It's like the intro that kind of says what the purpose of the Constitution is. The articles, that's the main part that says how government is set up. That's like the rule book part. And then the amendments. Those are all the changes to the Constitution that have occurred over time. So like we said, the preamble is kind of like the introduction. It just says why the Constitution was written and why the founders thought that it was important and necessary. And it just talks about how the Constitution is there to provide stability and order for the citizens, to protect the citizens, and to make sure that the government has the best interest of people in mind when they're doing what they need to do to run an effective government. So what's in Article 1? Article 1 is the first article, and it sets up the legislative branch. Remember, there's three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. Each one has an article that says how it's supposed to be set up. So we'll focus on Article 1 right now for the legislative branch. So the legislative branch is the one that makes laws. They have the power to make laws or legislate. That's where they get their name from. So you can think legislative laws. They both begin with an L. That's how you can kind of remember them. So they're the people that are in charge of making laws in this country. And they have to consider constituents, that's me and you, the people that they represent. They have to consider our needs and our wants to decide what is good for the nation as a whole. So when they're making these laws, they need to think about us and what will work best for us. They shouldn't be thinking about themselves. They should be thinking about the people who voted for them and the people that they represent. Congress can do a lot of stuff. Out of all the branches, it's the branch that has not the most power, but kind of the most things that it can do. They look at elections to make sure that there's no corruption in them. They set up rules within their own branches. They're the ones that get to decide how much we have to pay in taxes, which might make you guys not like them too much. They set up rules for naturalization, which means who can be an American citizen or not. They can declare war. The president cannot declare war. A lot of people think the president can. But most importantly, they're the ones that make all the laws that are necessary and proper. That's what it says in the Constitution. That they can make all laws that are necessary and proper, that we need to run an effective country. So then how is the actual legislative branch set up? You have Congress, and they meet in that building that you see on the screen there, that you've probably seen in movies and stuff like that. That's where they meet. And then it's split up into two houses. Each side of that building is a different part of Congress. One side is the Senate, and one side is the House of Representatives. They're both made up of people who represent us, but they're picked a little bit differently. Each state has two senators. So Pennsylvania has two, Delaware has two, Alaska has two, and that's how the Senate's set up. The House of Representatives is a little bit different. The bigger your state is in terms of population, the more people you get in the House of Representatives. So, like, California is the biggest state. They have, I think, about 50 representatives. Then you got a state like Alaska that doesn't have that many people in it. They only get one representative. So that one's based on how many people you have in your state. The more people you have in your state, the more members or votes you get in that part of Congress. So the Senate's the smaller one. That's the one where every state gets 2 votes. It's referred to as the upper house. The vice president of the United States is the person that's supposed to be in charge of the Senate. And what do? They get to figure out how to raise money, they can impeach the president, and they approve laws. So how do you become a senator? You have to live in the state that you represent. So if I live in Pennsylvania, that means I can't be the senator of Delaware. That wouldn't make sense because I don't know about Delaware. I don't live there. So if I'm going to be the senator of a state, I should live in that state so I understand that state and its wants and needs. You have to be 30 years old, so I couldn't be a senator. I'm almost there, though. And you get to be that senator for 6 years. And you also have to be a citizen of the United States for 9 years. House of Representatives is similar to the Senate, except there's more people in it, and states aren't represented equally in this house. They're represented based on population. They call it the lower house. They call it the House of the People. The leader is called the Speaker of the House. He's the person that's in charge of the House. And the powers are very similar to the Senate. They can impeach. All laws have to go through the House first, though, because that's the one that's supposed to represent the people as a whole. That's how they set it up in the Constitution. So how do you become a representative? They only get elected for 2 years. They did that because they wanted these people that end up being in the House of Representatives to have to constantly win elections. Not to bother them or be a pain, but if they have to get elected every 2 years, that makes it so they have to really, really, really keep their constituents, me and you, happy. Because they don't get to just sit in that job for a really long time. 2 years isn't that long of a time. So they have to do a really good job or they're not going to get reelected. So that's why it's only 2 years. They have to basically kind of reapply for their job almost every 2 years and get voted back in. If they don't, then somebody else gets to be the representative. You have to be 25 years old, so I could be a representative, and you have to be a citizen for at least 7 years. So both of these groups, we'll go back to one of the other slides here, the Senate and the House, both of these groups do similar things. They both decide on laws, and they decide the laws that are best for the people of where they represent and of the country as a whole. They're just set up a little bit differently to make it so the small states have a place in the Senate where they're kind of equal to the bigger states. What can they do to the other branches? A lot of stuff. Remember, this is checks and balances, one of our big ideas. One of the things they can do is if they make a law and they give it to the president has to sign it. If the president doesn't sign it, it's called a veto. I mean, the president says, nope, this isn't going to be a law. But the legislative branch can actually override or say to the president, no, it is going to be a law. They just have to get a lot of votes to override or cancel that president's veto. That's an example. Another example is if there's a war and the war ends and there's a treaty to kind of decide the end of the war and what's going to happen, the legislative branch has to approve of that treaty. They also can declare a war. The president's not supposed to be able to declare a war. They get to figure out where money goes around the country, so to what different parts of the country, to education, to defense, to transportation, whatever. They decide where money goes. And the big one is they can impeach or remove the president. They can put the president on trial if they feel like it's necessary. Same thing with the judicial branch. There's things they can do to the judicial branch. They can impeach or remove judges just like they can the president. They have to approve all of the judges that get to be in the judicial branch too. So the president picks the judges, but then the legislative branch gets to say either yes, that person can be a judge, or no, they can't. And there's some other ones up here, but I just wanted to give you some examples. So what does this branch have to do with you? This is the branch that the people of this country have the most effect on. This is the one that we directly influence because we get to pick who is in this branch. The people that are a part of this branch, legislative, are voted on by us. They're voted on every 2 years for the House or every 6 years for the Senate. Now, so how does that influence you? You might just be saying, well, they're not going to do anything for me. A big reason that a lot of people don't like government, or they think that the government doesn't do anything for them, they never talk to these people or try and influence these people that represent us. If you don't like a law, or you think that there's a law that should be in place, you can contact your congressional representative. You can contact the people that are supposed to represent you. You can write them a letter. You can call them on the phone. You can send them an email, and that's something we're actually going to do later in the year. But every law in place was created with you in mind. They thought they were doing what was best for you. If they weren't doing what was best for you, it's our job to tell them, and a lot of times people don't do that. So that's the end of this. Make sure you answer the questions that are below my face. Make sure you join us for a live class on Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you have questions, need help, just contact me. My information's there. If not, good luck.